Well, good evening, everybody. This is Michael, and I'm substituting for Tuya here for yet a little while, but I think within a week she'll be back presenting the Ask programs and with music. We couldn't quite get that entirely together. She's up in the Little Bear Little Bear Meditation Center, and I'm here in the Temple of Silence. We are dealing today with the evoking, well, first invoking and hopefully evoking the soul of nations. It's one of the major ways we can address the possible improvement. When I'm thinking about some of the things that are going on in various parts of the world with government, if the nationals of those countries would attune to the great values that the soul of their nation is supposed to produce, then things would be much better for everybody. So when things are going amiss, the soul of the nation holds the key. And that's what we must learn to assist those principal values. The preservation of values is the task of the initiate on the first ray. This is the ray of government, and we're trying to lend a hand. Well, what I would like to do is to continue the reading from The Destiny of the Nations. Now, this will be in English, of course, and when Tuya returns, we may have some additional finish for the people who need that language. Last time when we read 1 week ago, we talked about the cessation, the necessity for the cessation of the fighting between those who represent the different ideologies, that each one of them may hold a little piece of the whole puzzle. And we cannot, we have to end, he says, the attempt to impose our particular ideology, political or religious, and those are the two areas where the most problem is happening right now, I think. Our attempt to impose our ideology on other nations or persons. We probably would agree about this with respect to monarchy or fascism, but maybe we think we can impose democracy on nations for whom perhaps, or which are not ready for that type of government. And besides, as the Tibetans pointed out, no true democracy is presently existing. As a matter of fact, in a number of these countries, we have a Republican form of government, meaning there's representation of the people by different elected officials. And so the people are not getting a direct vote as they would in a democracy in terms of making the laws and all of that. Maybe it's more efficient, but let's see how it all evolves. Every one of the every one of the methods of government has something of value in it. First rate, second rate, third rate types. Even communism is said to be on the third ray, somewhat, and evolved by humanity. Democracy on the second and monarchy on the first. So I'll go on for a little while with readings from Master Decay, Destiny of the Nations, and we're on page 10. It would be of value next if I connected the three major centers of energy with the 5 rays, which are together today working towards the consummation of the plan for the race at this time. Now maybe we can find something here. Perhaps this picture of the globe will be useful to us. The 3 major planetary centers are, of course, Shambhala, hierarchy, and humanity. 3 of these streams of energy are working powerfully in the world at this time, and 2 others are struggling for expression. We're talking about the 5 rays which are today working through the consummation of the plan. Eventually, I suppose, there will be all 7. So 2 others are struggling for expression. Of these latter, one is struggling towards domination, and the other is struggling to hold on to that which it has so long controlled. It's always difficult when a nation has been in power to relinquish that which has been one of the major sources of its power. As we know, England had to relinquish its rulership or major control over the Commonwealth, over the group of nations over which it presided for so long, India being a major one. Anyway, we're referring now to the incoming 7th ray and the outgoing 6th ray. We have to understand the contrast between them and what they lead to. The 6th ray, of course, leads to a lot of reactionary attitudes, and the 7th ray under Uranus to progression, progressiveness. They constitute in their duality the reactionary and the progressive forces which are seeking to govern human thought, to determine natural and human evolution, and to produce widely divergent civilizations and culture, one of which would be the perpetuation and crystallization of that which now exists, and the other would be so entirely new as an outgrowth of the present world upheaval that it is difficult for the average student to conceive of its nature. Basically, this is a kind of a contest between Mars, representing the 6th ray, and Uranus, the planet of the new, representing the 7th ray. And by the time this century is over, the 6th ray would have faded from influence, so we have another 80 years or so to deal with the crystallization inherent in this phase of the cycle of the 6th ray. And the 4th ray, coming in 2025, will help us make the bridge between the values which can be preserved of the old civilization and those of the emerging new civilization. These 5 energies together will determine the trend of world affairs. Now I wonder here, mostly here we see basically rays 1, 2, and 6. We don't see ray 7. We'll have to see the rays that he considers to be the major rays in evidence at this time. In the 4th round, we really have at one time only 4 major rays asserting themselves, and it will grow in the 5th round and in the 6th and 7th rounds and so forth, more and more until the complete number is asserting themselves. So these 5 energies will determine the trend of world affairs. The problem before the hierarchy at this time is so to direct and control these powerful activities, that the plan, the divine plan, can be rightly materialized. And the close of this century and the beginning of the next see the purposes of God for this planet and for humanity assume right direction and proportion. Well, apparently it didn't happen entirely at the close of the last century, which is what DK means by this century, but let's see how it emerges in this 21st century. Things have been delayed for various reasons, and the possibility of humanity annihilating itself is a big one. In this way, the new culture for the relatively few, culture is always smaller than civilization, and the new civilization for the many during the coming age will start in such a manner that the peoples of the earth can go forward into an era of peace and true development, spiritual and material. And this is held out as a great incentive to discipleship workers such as we are. And we wonder whether in this particular century, the 21st, all of that will emerge with Pisces and the sixth ray still quite strong, though fading. I would like to remind you, he says, that the fact that you see the world picture as one of outstanding chaos, of striving ideologies and warring forces, of the persecution of minorities, of hatreds which are working out into a furious preparation for war, and of world anxiety and terror, does not really mean that you are seeing the picture as it is in reality. Well, let's admit it, we see these things, and even when this book was written, parts of it written after the Second World War had included, I'm not sure whether before or not, but I think the bulk afterwards. Anyway, this chaotic picture, this picture of all kinds of things going wrong is not, he says, necessarily as it is in reality. You are seeing what is superficial, temporal, ephemeral, and entirely concerned with the form aspect. So we need the spiritual discernment to see through these things. The hierarchy is primarily occupied, as you well know, or know well, with the consciousness aspect and with the unfoldment of awareness, using form as a means only for the accomplishment of its designs. A closer study of the forces which are producing the outer turmoil may clarify your vision and restore confidence in God's plan and its divine love and loveliness. Well, this is coming from an individual, a master who really does see, and advising us how we should see. Let us therefore consider these forces and their originating centers, and thus acquire perhaps a new vision and a more constructive point of view. So we have here the influence of the rays today. He begins this, it's page 12. First, the most obvious and powerful force in the world today is that of the first ray of will and power. It's one of those rays that is going to be responsible for the externalization and the reappearance and the coming of the new civilization. One needs its initiating power if one is going to have these new developments. So first, it's working out the most obvious and powerful force. It's working out in two ways. Number one, as the will of God in human world affairs, which is ever the will to good. One day triangles will demonstrate the spreading of the will to good between the triangle's members. Steadily, if you study human history intelligently, you will see that there has been a regular and rhythmic progression towards unity and synthesis in all departments of human affairs. This unity in multiplicity is the eternal plan a unity in consciousness, a multiplicity in form. Well, there we have it, the one and the many, and both are required. Then the second way it works out as a destructive element in world affairs. This refers to man's use of this force of will, which is seldom as yet the will to good in active expression, but something which leads to self-assertion of the individual or the nation, and to war with its accompaniments, separation, selfish diplomacy, hate, and armaments, disease, and death. Well, the world had just been through the Second World War, and all of these things had manifested themselves. The nationalistic aggression of certain nations in the Axis powers, and it failed. This is the force, this first-ray force, which pours into the world from the major world center, Shambhala. Little is known of Shambhala. More will be known as you study this text and note how world affairs are taking shape before your eyes, in accordance with my prevision as presented to your limited vision, and the obvious possibilities. These are necessarily and equally obvious effects of predisposing causes. Now, we're, as students of occultism, we're coming more and more in touch with the Shambhala force through the building of the Antahkarana and the evocation of the higher aspects of our nature. Only twice before in the history of mankind has this Shambhala energy made its appearance and caused its presence to be felt through the tremendous changes which were brought about. Number one, when the great human crisis, first great human crisis occurred at the time of individualization of man in ancient Lemuria, and we're told about some very astonishing deaths of the forms in which the solar angels were implanting themselves. Number two, there was a sinking of Lemuria too, not exactly a sinking, but a volcanic destruction. He doesn't seem to include it here. He says, at the time of the great struggle in Atlantean days between the, quote, lords of light and the lords of material expression, the lords of the dark face and the lords of the shining countenance. And, there have been other lesser impacts, etc., 1825 and so forth. But that's a long time between Atlantis and 1825. This little known divine energy now streams out from the holy center. It embodies in itself the energy which lies behind the world crisis of the moment. It is the will of God which to produce certain radical and momentous changes in the consciousness of the race which will completely alter man's attitude to life and his grasp of the spiritual, esoteric, and subjective essentials of living. It is this force which will bring about, in conjunction with second-ray force, that tremendous crisis imminent in the human consciousness which we call the second crisis, and it's just about upon us, the initiation of the race into the mystery of the ages, into that which has been hid from the beginning. So humanity is about to become the first degree initiate, and when the Christ appears, it will signal that as many of humanity as are scheduled to take that first initiation have indeed done so. The first crisis, that of individualization, right, as you have been taught, was the crisis of individualization, wherein man became a living soul. The second crisis is the immediate one of racial initiation, made possible, if you will but believe it, by the many individual initiations which have been undergone by those members of the human family who had vision and a willingness to pay the price. So the many little expansions of the individuals involved led to the possibility of racial initiation, which is now imminent upon us. It's a beautiful picture, and it's coming. This particular and somewhat unusual ray energy, first ray, right, is expressing itself in two ways. Perhaps it would be more correct to say in two ways that are recognizable by man, because it should be remembered that these ray forces express themselves as potently in other kingdoms in nature as they do in the human. But we don't, of course, pay so much attention. We pay more attention to the human developments and effects. For instance, one phase of the destructive aspects of the first ray force has been the organized and scientific destruction of forms in the animal kingdom. Yeah. This is the destroying force as manipulated by man. And we see that, in the systematized slaughter of many of the members of the animal kingdom, mostly we say for purposes of food, but otherwise and sometimes cruelly wanton in its nature. Another phase of the same force, which can be noted in relation to the unfoldment of consciousness in subtle, subtle, powerful ways, can be seen in the effect which human beings have upon the domestic animals, hastening their evolution and stimulating them into forms of advanced instinctual activity, driving forward as the first ray ever does. I mentioned these two phases as an illustration of the effect of first ray energy in the animal kingdom as expressed through human activity. Well, we're getting near the end of the material that I have here, and perhaps it will be necessary, I think it will be necessary for me to stop this reading and pick it up next time, or Tuya will pick it up, whenever it can be. And but we get the idea that there's a conflict between the sixth and seventh ray, and certain great ray energies are being released, 5 particularly, and he's beginning to enumerate and let us know how they are working out. So I'm just going to make a note here for us to begin next time. Now, so many of us may not be in the political field, but politics do condition the lives of so many, even billions of people. So we have to know something about it from the esoteric side. And it really is fascinating, even though the book is, let's say 75, I don't know, maybe not quite, 70 years old, let's say, and a little more. The way he presents the energies which condition the different countries and their destinies and their goal and their possible cooperation with each other, and the dangers and the possibilities inherent in the situation is just marvelous. And I really recommend that, you read that. We'll be reading it together, as we do with the Glamour World Problem and the Glamour webinars. We're reading that book, and Tuya has been reading excerpts from the Reappearance of the Christ at the beginning of those meditations, those Ask meditations, and that's the Tibetan's meditation on the Reappearance of the Christ, preparing the way, and we'll be reading through the whole book, which is again, marvelous book, and all of this leading up to the imminent beginning of the third installment of the teaching to start in 2025. So we're in the midst of a series of bridging treatises that the Master DK is giving for the elevation of humanity, and we're poised to receive the new dispensation. Well, I think, just to concentrate a little bit, we are working in relation to one or other of the planetary centers and one country or another, and we should know the sole ray of the countries in which we are working, Russia, 7th ray, and England, 2nd ray, and probably the the members of the Commonwealth or the the British Kingdom, as it used to be, Australia and Canada, they have a strong second ray. New Zealand too, second ray. On the soul level probably, and when it comes to India, the first ray soul. Where are we gathered? Canada, yeah, exactly. Know, if possible, the soul ray of your nation. And just think about that for a moment. The soul ray of your nation. Because through that ray, your nation, with all of its other rays and astrological signs, will make its contribution. The soul ray will guide, at this point in history, its contribution to the fullness of the whole, to the rounding out of the international situation. And maybe it should be done every day, but at least once a week, think about your equipment and your purpose in this incarnation and your plan to express that purpose. And what is it that you are doing and intend to do that can really help the soul of your nation emerge? That's such an important question. Now, if the nationals in the countries for whom a motto has been assigned could know that motto and align their life with it, it would make a big difference in a positive sense. Let me see if I can quickly find a couple of the mottos, from the destiny of the nations. So I can begin, let us say, with the United States, since I am an American, apparently. Let's just suppose that the nationals of the following countries really knew their motto, their guiding motto. Those in India, I hide the light. Those in China, I indicate the way. Those in Germany, I preserve. Those in France, I release the light. Those in the United Kingdom, I serve. Those in Italy, I carve the paths. Those in the United States, I light the way. Those in Russia, I link two ways. Those in Austria, I serve the lighted way. Those in Spain, I disperse the clouds, and those in Brazil, I hide the seed. How wonderful it would be if we, living in any of those countries, knew the motto of our country. And if a motto has not been assigned, as there are so many of the smaller nations, let's say, and the developing nations for whom a motto has not been assigned, there are, however, astrological signs and rays either given or implied. And if we could be in alignment with those signs and rays, and a motto if it exists, and if we would hold them in our consciousness and say, look, I'm building the soul nature of my country, and when I speak and act and do whatever, I'm thinking about how this affects my country also, as well as the people in the immediate vicinity, and as well as humanity as a whole. So think about that for a minute. I mean, we'll get more into it later, but if you know, for instance, that the Scandinavian countries have a Libra soul and a Cancer personality, and that race 7 is very important to them. If you know, let's say that Canada has a ray 2 and a ray 7, very important, but also Taurus soul and a Libra personality, just like China, I think. Unless it's reversed. I think so. Yeah. Canada is not right here, but I know elsewhere it's given with Libra and Taurus as very important. So if you know something about your country and its energies, just think for a minute how you can align with those energies and draw them forth. The main thing is the soul ray and the soul sign, not all of which are assigned yet, but you may have an idea. Because that is our task, to find the greater purposes and see how our individual and immediate group action in the place where we are can further those ideas and ideals and the emergence of the energies which are destined to emerge. So think of yourself as a spiritual national of your country, a spiritual citizen, a spiritual natural, and also, of course, in relation to all of humanity. But we can't just think about humanity and ignore the state of our country, which has a distinctive soul contribution to make. Now also, in these programs we think about the emergencies through which humanity is passing, and there are plenty of them these days, and many more to come, as the forces of materialism try to fight to the last ditch, as DK talks about it. Let's see if there's a significant um, change by 2025. I don't think we'll be entirely rid of it, though, until, and never entirely, of course, but not for a while, not until the Judgment Day, which is millions of years ahead. But we have an anticipation of that coming. So we have problems. And this image of the clouds surrounding the earth somehow represent, or can be seen as representing our problems. There are all kinds of things going on, and under the guidance of the Christ, we can be empowered with love and wisdom and intelligence and sacrificial will to help. We align with the great Lord and seek to serve Him in solving humanity's problems. He is real, He is here. He is, in a way, all-pervading in terms of our globe, having a huge effect and an increasing effect in times to come. And so we say, we have gathered in your name, Lord Maitreya. Be with us. But there are problems that he will try to help, he will help humanity solve, but we have to take these problems under our own care, and we can't just wait for the hierarchy to solve things, because as the Christ said, by human hands and human feet shall this be done. So here are a list of those problems: bad international relations, wrong human relations in general, nationalism, which is egotism on the level of countries, problems of where do we live and can we live there, and they're all interrelated, these problems. The problems of lying, that's just ignoring the truth. We call it false communication, false news, and famine is derivative of our care of the earth. Right now, climate change is a huge thing. There are others, and they derive from some of the ones we've been talking about here. Right now, two huge storms are bearing down on different parts of the world. There is the Hurricane Florence, which is made landfall and causing unprecedented flooding, even though it has somewhat weakened. But when you have 90 miles an hour winds, it's not very weak. So people are being stranded and lost. And the Mangkhut is a huge typhoon hitting the Philippines and other places in the Far East, and it's the biggest storm this year. And it's category 4, or is it even 5? Unthinkable, unbelievable. You see pictures. So let's focus in the energy of love, wisdom, and in the energy of the will to good and intelligence, and visualize those terrible situations which man has largely somehow evoked. We just are not paying attention to the stewardship of our planet. We may be going through initiations, and that can cause some drastic changes, but man and his habits are complicating the issue badly. And in selfishness and ignorance, we prefer not to take responsibility. And so we get, I don't know how many of us have ever been through a hurricane or tornado, but for many it's just a horrifying experience. And we send our courage, our strength, our love, our goodwill, and the sense of intelligence to solve the rescue problems and other problems in the aftermath. So much of the flooding, which may be monumental, is going to occur in the aftermath of the storm's impact. So let's tune in together and on those situations and send all the good that we can. Let's keep these trials in mind, you know. We may be in safe places at the moment, or maybe not, but parts of humanity are really suffering under the perturbations, the imbalances for which humanity is negligently responsible. And that has to be corrected. And when we think about emergencies, we also think about all kinds of untruth and manipulation that's going on simply for the sake of preserving selfish prerogatives, caring only about the little ego. It's a stage, okay, but it's not supposed to be the stage which is governing the nations of the world at this time. So we ask for the emergence of truth so that we can clearly see in an undisguised manner what the issues are. You know, when we're filled with lies, you can't see clearly and you don't know what steps to take. But we wish for the sun of truth to shine. That's what we hope for. And see and visualize. And that will really begin to happen when the souls of nations are emerging, which is our immediate responsibility when considering the work of those who gather for this particular meditation. We are responsible, and we can work inwardly, esoterically, to great effect. And I would almost say, you know, let us see if we can feel the presence of the soul of our nation. Sometimes it occurs in special events, or maybe under the stimulation of certain art or music, you know. You can feel what your nation is trying to express as a soul. Maybe some of you are familiar with the piece of music by Edward Elgar, Englishman, called Nimrod. And when I first heard it, I just knew it captured in no small measure the soul of the people of the United Kingdom. So we've got to feel the soul of our nations and care about them and care about our alignment with those soul objectives. Because the great transformation is underway, and though before our eyes the chaos appears, DK tells us to regard it as superficial, of course needing to end, but superficial, and beneath it all, the wonder of the new age is emerging. Now, we students of the Ageless Wisdom teaching, we are certainly not powerless. We're not, representatives of our nation in the congresses and parliaments and so forth. We're not there. But we're in a powerful position because we know certain things. And we are determined to help. Where crisis may arise, it's certainly going to rise constantly in these next 7 years. I think that's far enough to think ahead. Although for our edification, DK said, and it sounds promising, that Russia and the United States would cooperate on formulating legislation for the welfare of children around the year 2035. Kind of promises that we get through the 2025 era and that there can be cooperation between two of the three nations in whose hands the destiny of humanity lies, the United States, Russia, and the United Kingdom. So let us grow inwardly more and more responsible, more and more aware, more and more open to the subtle things and the causative nature of subtle things, and our responsibility to maintain those subtle causes so that the proper emergence into the Aquarian age can occur. And in all of this, in doing this, we are cooperating with the hierarchy and engineering their own externalization and the reappearance of the Great Lord when the time is right. It's a huge inner responsibility, and we take it seriously even if no other eye should see it. He for whom the whole world waits has said that whatsoever shall be asked in his name, and with faith in the response, will see it accomplished. And we certainly ask together for the upliftment, the transformation of humanity in the Aquarian age. And we do have faith in the response of the Great Lord and his hierarchy. And all this to the end that our inwardly sacred planet will become outwardly so. A great initiation is upon us. It's the fourth in a sequence of 7. It's a tough one. It's a renunciation, but it is major. And we're experiencing it on our globe and in our chain, especially. And it will lead to one day to the second cosmic initiation of our planetary logos, and the Judgment Day, which will see us taking our place in the ranks of the sacred planets, more and more sacred. Let us close by saying the great invocation together, realizing that one of our greatest duties is to distribute the great invocation, emphasize it as a world prayer. It is very powerful. It will change the lives of those who use it. It's not something that was just supposed to have been done, 70 years ago or 50 years ago. It's ongoing. And we work at that task. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Friends, thank you for attending. Tomorrow we continue, and we will be working with attracting money, resources for the support, the promotion of hierarchical purposes. So, we value your financial support. Even more, we value your meditative presence. That's the most important, but the financial support is also important so that in a practical way we can continue with the work of teaching and spreading the ageless wisdom and carrying forth service activities as the Tibetan outlined them. A very important thing to keep the triangles going, to call for prepare for the reappearance and the externalization, and to evoke the soul of nations, and to help dissipate glamour wherever we can find it individually and on a worldwide basis. And yes, the tangible support is important too. And to gather the Christ energy, the Christ consciousness in the chalice. Our causal body is sometimes called the chalice, and we gather that Buddhic Christ energy. This is the role of the Blue Rose Sisters. The Christ energy is something, if we've experienced it, which is unique. And one thing to talk about it, and another thing to have your heart swelling with the presence, pervading presence of the great Christ energy. And we offer the studies in the Moria Federation, of course, deep studies. And we continue with this idea of the new psychology and the seven rays and esoteric astrology, all these things the Tibetan emphasized. As we continue our work together under the Tibetan's guidance, and he has so many in his group on different rays. It's a training ashram, and we are grateful to participate with him. All of this bringing the Lord Maitreya, as he's known in the East, closer to human consciousness. And we thank you for your presence. I love this next picture. We don't say much about it, but there are all the flags of the nations, and that wonderful radiant heart above it all. One day we'll have that kind of unified picture for humanity and for the whole planet. It's very beautiful, I think. Okay, friends, we'll be seeing you soon, and from Tuya and me, lots of love, many blessings, and onwards, onwards.